This is the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl, episode number 147. Hello, Timothy.
Hello. Hello. A lot of
Hello.
bit busy. I had my birthday, a busy week. I had a bunch of shows, kind of back in it a little bit.
That's right. We had
Feeling
a
good.
retrovirus rehearsal. It's all swinging and swinging. It's all good.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we've got to talk about the man with the penis on his arm.
Oh boy.
I mean, a man whose penis fell off. I don't even know how that happens. The doctor decided to graft some of the cells onto his arm. Is this true?
Yeah, I think that I didn't read all the details, but I think that's if you don't want the cells, you don't want the whole thing to just start just dying. You want to keep it alive somehow. So you got to kind of somehow link it with your own DNA. I think that's what's going on. So they graft it onto his arm in order to keep it around, in order to ultimately reattach it between his legs. Is that? I think that's what's going on.
Well, they haven't replaced it between his legs yet. The thing is, it started growing on his arm pretty much full size. And he said, well, that was quite a bit to talk about at the local pub. I guess it was.
We were talking about this last night. I mean, public nudity is not allowed. So like, does he have to wear long sleeve shirts all the time? Like, how does that, I mean, does your penis have to be between your legs before, in order for it to be like offensive? I mean, it's not even operating. He's not pissing or.
Well, I have to say it's kind of restrictive if the only place a penis is well, where it belongs.
I assume he can't get erections off his arm.
Well, it might be permanently erect. That's what I haven't figured out yet. I mean, if it was just flopping there, that'd be kind of hard to manhandle. Yeah. I'm not sure.
Mr. Softy.
Mr. Softy. I'm always terrified of the Mr. Softy song when it goes down the street for some reason. I was stalked by Mr. Softy once, and I mean that in more ways than one. Anyway, it was the lack of oxygen in his blood that meant doctors had to abort the operation and then stuck his 6-inch penis to his left arm temporarily. Oh,
but it was like a highway road project. It was like supposed to be temporary, but it ultimately ended up being years.
It's not a pretty sight. And there was actually a documentary on BBC Channel 4. And he explained how he had done more and more drugs after becoming homeless, and his relationship fell apart. And then after his operation, he said
his penis fell apart.
Yeah, his penis fell. I'm an everyday man that does the same things every day that men do, but I just don't have a penis. So 12 years ago, he had a nice partner, and his baby came along, and then his penis just fell off. Kind of sad.
Oh my God. Well, not falling off, but falling in. Oof. A woman was at a campsite in California.
Oh, I love this. Yeah.
She was at one of these campsite outhouses, and she lost her cell phone down in the tank of the outhouse.
Porta potty.
Yeah, it's a specific one. I never heard of the style. But anyhow, so she was trying to dismantle the toilet. She was using her dog's leash, trying to fish it up. She couldn't get it. And then next thing you know, she slipped, fell head first down into the tank.
No.
And she was in there for about 20 minutes when she's like, she's so embarrassed she couldn't get out. She's like, I got to call 911. And
she's going to call 911. Oh, because she got her cell phone. But in the meantime, she's in the shitter.
It must have been pretty thick down there because the cell phone was operating. It was just like, it was like on a heap. And so basically she managed to call 911, and they dragged her out, and they said, well, she's lucky she's not really sick. She was in all these toxic fumes. And it was, I think, ultimately more embarrassing than anything else. We'll see what happens. But sometimes it's like when people jump into the subway tracks to retrieve their phone, or sometimes you might want to leave it to professionals before you put your life on the line for such things.
Oh, my word. Okay. Now, science, I've got this recent fetish about mushrooms and fungi in general, because I just do, thinking they may be a specific form of aliens that do have their own language. But scientists have found that fungi are capable of thriving in toxic environments, and they're thriving in Chernobyl by absorbing and feeding off the surviving radiation. So this discovery has led scientists to believe that this ability could be harnessed to actually shield human beings who are routinely, which is almost all of us at this point, exposed to dangerous amounts of radiation. Cancer patients, nuclear power plant engineers, astronauts in space. So according to a recent experiments, they started to make shields to protect potential Mars colonizers from cosmic radiation.
Whoa, amazing.
I think it's pretty amazing.
Well, because we've mentioned this before. I know because of Chernobyl, a lot of the weather patterns after it was spreading radiation and just kind of random parts of the continent. And so I know, like in Bavaria or in parts of Italy, where people like to hunt wild boar and eat them. There's all these systems in place that they have to test the meat, because the boars are eating the mushrooms, and sometimes they're loaded with radiation, and they just absorb it. They just absorb radiation. I mean, that's what they do.
And so you got to watch out for those truffles, is what I'm saying.
Correct.
You got to watch out while you're snuffling around.
You also have to watch out for trouble. As a man, security was breached at the, I don't know, I think it was Buckingham Palace or wherever the Queen of England was hanging out.
Right. Oh yeah.
This guy, he starts, I don't know, he charms the guards. He calls himself Father Cruz, and says he's
posing as a pastor, right?
He said, yeah, posing as a pastor, but then he gets in and he talks about his military service.
Uh-oh.
He's, by the way, drinking and eating these kind of high-fat rich people royal pre-gout meals, and they're having a good time. It's like their version of Secret Service. Who I think it's so funny about the Secret Service, it's just how easily they're seduced with just like hedonism and a good time. You'd think that would be like the first thing they have to like train to train against her to be seduced by. So basically they start knowing they're in deep. They kind of fucked up because the guy starts talking about how he's also not just a priest and didn't just spend time in Iraq as a kind of military fighting priest. He also claims he was a test pilot for military planes ejection seats. That basically he was this guy that was like a test a crash test dummy for you're flying like an F-16, and then they fucking launch you out in a parachute, which they knew something's up. Like, what the hell? Then he also said that he has many of his vital organs were actually transplants from other soldiers.
So finally they start catching up.
Yeah. And so it's very embarrassing to the royals, and it's a breach of security, and they're looking into it.
Well, one of them, either the guards or the so-called pastor ejection dummy, must have been tripping. And speaking about tripping,
yes,
this is kind of startling. The headline is magic mushrooms started growing in a Nebraska man's blood after he injected them into his veins. So a few days after the injection, he started to experience fatigue, diarrhea, nausea, yellowing of the skin, vomiting blood. So as the psychoactive compound in magic mushroom psilocybin, they're treating mental health issues like depression now, but a 30-year-old bipolar man in Nebraska tried to treat himself by injecting the mushrooms rather than eating them. And within days, he experienced torturous symptoms and organ fatigue, while the fungi, my favorite neighbors, started to grow in his blood. The unattended patient spent more than 3 weeks breathing through a ventilator in the hospital as he neared death. Eventually, a team of doctors were able to flush the toxins out of his system in order to save his life. This was published in the Journal of the Academy of Consultation Liaison Psychiatry, published in the Journal of the Academic Consultation of Liaison Psychiatry. And the man's case study revealed that he had stopped taking his bipolar medication in an attempt to reduce his opioid use. But during an ensuing series of manic depressive episodes, he read about magic mushrooms and then boiled the fungi into a liquid and injected it intravenously.
Bold.
Well, fortunately, the man's family had discovered his dire state before it got any worse. However, his liver and kidneys had already begun to fail by the time he arrived at the hospital. So, his blood test revealed severe, bacterial infection. stemming from a microbe and he also tested positive for fungal infection, which stunned the physicians, and it meant the mushrooms he injected were currently growing in his blood.
Was he tripping the whole time? Like what other?
They don't mention that, but he was tripping on his way to the bathroom because he couldn't stop vomiting or shitting.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well,
it took 22 days in the hospital to get him out of there. Oh my word.
Well, even if they sustain, they get everything under control and they sustain the situation, or not sustain, they maintain his health and somehow bring him back. He's got a lot of other issues and a bigger road ahead of him.
I mean, it's fungi. You don't inject it.
Good advice.
Drink it, chew it, bake it. Don't inject it.
Good advice.
Well, speaking of injecting some reality into the circus of modern times, are our next guests. Welcome, Jarry and Lucien Greaves from the Satanic Temple. This is the Lydia and Spin. Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, special guest from the Satanic Temple. This is the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and Malcolm Jarry of the Satanic Temple. That would be thesatanictemple.com for all of you that want more information. Very excited to have you on this podcast, and welcome.
Thank you again for having me.
I guess you're very busy with, and thank you very much for being the voice of reason about this outrageous attempt at banning abortion everywhere, because that's one of the things that the Satanic Temple is about. The freedom of the individual. It's about cutting down hypocrisy. It's about just trying to dive into and exorcise the bullshit. And this is really bullshit that we're going through right now.
Yeah, it's some crazy times that we're living through right now, and it is remarkable when Satanists are the voice of sanity in the world.
It's not surprising to me. Why don't you define what a Satanist is, so that those who are wondering whether or not they're Satanist, I think, will be able to actually say, yes, I too am a Satanist.
Yeah, I think it sort of defies definition to a certain degree. I think it wants to defy definition, and usually that sort of thing makes me bristle. Because I do appreciate and recognize the value of definitions, but it really is an identity thing. It's something that just fits with you. There are certain traits, I think, that are universal among the Satanic community. Certainly a kind of rugged individualism, resentment of unearned, unwarranted authority. We've used the word tyrannical authority, but tyrannical might be kind of extreme. I think there are certain kinds of authority, if it's earned, that one should respect. But it's the authority over others and the capacity to restrict one's liberty and freedoms and capacity to make decisions for oneself that is offensive and problematic, and not wanting to be infantilized and to pursue one's course, but to pursue one's own course in a way that's respectful and responsible, because others want to pursue their own paths as well. And so having complete liberty is not practical or rational. So there are boundaries on it.
Well, I'm going to read this. I'm going to read this from the satanictemple.com website, which I think really says a mouthful. We have publicly confronted hate groups, fought for the abolition of corporal punishment in public schools, applied for equal representation when religious installations are placed on public property, provided religious exemption and legal protection against laws that unscientifically restrict women's reproductive autonomy, exposed harmful pseudo-scientific practitioners in mental health care, organized clubs alongside other religious after-school clubs in school, besieged besieged by proselytizing organizations and engaged in other advocacy in accordance with our tenets, which I will read them out later in this broadcast. So, I mean, really, when I think, and by the way, people can also check out the Hail Satan documentary, which is pretty interesting. I really love the part where the Baphomet statue is brought, dragged, and was that in Columbus, Ohio? Where was that actually?
That was Arkansas. That was
in Arkansas. Yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, that was it was a fun journey. It was there was so the Baphomet was constructed in response to a bill in Oklahoma, well, the erection of 10 Commandment statue in Oklahoma, where we asked to have our own religious statue placed alongside. We would never want our statue there just independent by itself, but as an opportunity to contrast it and make public ground a playground of ideas. So not even just us, the Hindus wanted their statue and other groups.
Bring in Kali and Ganesh. Why not?
Yeah, but that's great, and I have no problem with the 10 Commandments there. Among other things, it's like like I said, a playground of ideas. It's just like it becomes fun. It's a circus-like atmosphere of sorts, and that's kind of nice. The alternative is nothing, which is certainly acceptable from a constitutional standpoint, but I think it's more interesting and more fun. Everyone having an opportunity. So that got struck down by their state constitution, and certainly we played a role in that to some degree. But in Arkansas, they passed their own legislation that was drafted by this one organization that just churns this out for all these different states. And there's a Senator Jason Rapert who was the one who sponsored that bill. And he had made some statement about being a cold day in hell if the Baphomet was ever, in Arkansas.
What was his name again?
Jason Rapert. Yeah, I know.
There we go. Hello.
He's in the movie. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's just fate just hands you gifts of that nature. Well,
and again, just him stating that it'll be a cold day in hell, because part of the problem with religious fanatics is that they do believe in this preposterous grandpa in a white robe in the sky who will send you to hell if you're bad. I mean, really, can we start there with how ridiculous it is? Thank you.
Were you raised in a religious family?
No, so I kind of come at it, the whole organization from a very different place from many of the people that I encounter and work with, and even Doug. We have a different background that way. I came from a secular Jewish family that, I am Jewish. We identify as ethnically Jewish, but we never practice the religion. We never, the rituals and things of that nature, to any, significant degree. So I never had the baggage or the hang-up or the, I never was dragged to, wherever and was told, going to hell and have suffer all the scars of that kind of abuse.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in New York.
Okay.
I grew up in New York. So we, so I, it was funny. So like, I do a bunch, Doug and I spent a lot of time on the road together, and we stopped off at the Creationism Museum in Kentucky. And
Doug is one of the other masterminds at your temple.
Doug is the other mastermind. It's the two of us.
Yeah,
it's just the two of us. And it's always been just the two of us. There are all sorts of people who come out of the woodwork and make all sorts of absurd claims that they were,
Right. So, but you two are the masterminds, but there are many branches now across America.
We have congregations.
Right, which is great.
But as far as who conceived the organization, who runs it, continues to and sets the agenda, develops the campaigns, and that's from day one. That's dug in
Did you tell me the other day that this kind of started in high school with you and Doug? Like the kind of the germ of this concept came
well,
to
that
you?
would be a great story, but it was actually college.
Oh, college. Okay.
But I like the high school thing. But it was we met in college, and
over. Oh, right. I did like that story. So you meet in college, but he kind of played the devil's advocate when he whispered in your ear something when you were trying to flirt with a girl and it wasn't working. Is this true?
Well, I was self-sabotage because I went on some rant about public education, and then Doug interjected and said, he's right, so
it was kind of like a Cyrano de Bergerac meets Satan kind of thing.
Well, let's just reiterate for the 1,000,001th time that Satanism has nothing to do with Satan per se, unless you consider that Satan was a rebel. I mean, if you believe any of this nonsense, because really Satanism to me is just addressing hypocrisy, talking about freedom, and trying to get to the meat of the matter of the individual rights, and especially in accordance with all of the public service that the Satanic Temple is and has been doing recently. I mean, from whether it's public cleaning up public highways, protesting. I'd never heard this word before, but my friend just said when I was talking about this Satanic Temple, he goes, "Oh, they're artivist," meaning art and activist together. I'm like, pretty much that's what they are. Yeah.
Yeah, no, there is a relevance to Satan. There's this literary Satan, and there's this metaphoric representation, and it's not just religion, but all communication is contingent and dependent on some abstract or metaphoric referent that everyone can sort of relate to. That there's this image. In this case, it's an image of this rebellious figure who if you look at the various romantic writers, is imbued with certain, really positive character traits, and it's those things that bind the organization around this, this literary figure, and those metaphors, I think it's the loss of those metaphors about like today's society. There used to be a canon. For the longest time, it was the Bible in schools, but when the Bible went away and was taken out of schools, you had Shakespeare, you had, maybe you had, I don't know which high schools, maybe the Iliad or Odyssey or something. But there were certain works that everyone knew and everyone was familiar with. But most people knew the story of the Odyssey, whether they read it, and so it didn't matter if you went to Kentucky or to Florida or Montana or California. Everyone knows or used to know those stories, and it united America as a culture through that canon. So the temple members, the Satanists, we are all different in various ways, but we all can unite under the appreciation and understanding of those metaphors. And unfortunately, the country is crumbling because we no longer have that metaphoric unity.
Sure. And it's not just maybe the classic stories, but it's also, there seems to be a rejection of science, a wave of that's happening. There's a rejection of pillars of reality that were maybe the foundation to what ultimately became a middle class, that historically only aristocracy had access to education. And now once the Enlightenment comes, people have pillars of reality they can make commentary on no matter where they're coming from. And now it seems like the pillars of reality are bigger enemies in different ideologies. It's really kind of inconsistent and kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah, well, it's heartbreaking because I think it's been Hegelian. I think before the difference being that you had elites who the elites might have done many horrible things in the past and been abusive, but Louis XIV still created Versailles. And you don't have the elites today, constructing anything, any kind of legacy like that. And so it's the clash of that where we no longer have an elite class that is cultured. They're base and vulgar and
well, it's revenge of the nerds. The tech revolution, and my theory is it's a lot of guys who had sexual rejection in their formative years, and there's a real revenge based on what their economic violence and their motivations. It's a little pathetic, if you ask me.
I'm gonna boil it down to this: the virus of stupidity, greed, cruelty, and war is something we have not been able to abolish. And usually the worst of that does take place in the male of the species. Correct me if I'm fucking wrong. I don't understand why, especially in this day and age. I mean, one of my main mantras is same as it ever was, because it is the same as it ever was. Some things progress, but we're back now almost to the 50s. And even before that, with unnecessary wars, millions of refugees everywhere, the abolition of individual freedoms, and the impoverishment of most of the frickin' world. Hello, we've been joined. Greetings, my friend.
How do you do?
Perfectly. How about you?
Not bad. No, not bad at all. Thank you.
Who have we with us now?
I am Lucien Greaves,
Greetings, Lucien.
spokesperson for the Satanic Temple.
Exactly. And thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
Tim and I are very excited that we're actually coming to the Salem headquarters very soon to entertain you with our performance, Murderous, again, where the wheel of violence may be turned back against the enemy who promotes most of it. That brought a smile to your lips.
Yeah. So are both you guys in Salem right now? What am I missing something here?
We're both in Massachusetts and not far from the temple.
Well, that's where Tim is from. Tim Dahl is from.
My mother lives in Gloucester, so just up the road. It was, obviously Salem is famous, even on the international level, for the witch trials and all that stuff. So this was a strategic location when you picked the city of Salem, Massachusetts.
Absolutely, yeah. We picked it for pretty much that reason, that and because they have been really warm and welcoming of us. We've really worked well with the community there. They respect us. We get along great with them. We try to do all sorts of things for the community, and it's been we've been able to maintain a low profile at the same time too.
Yeah, exactly. It's really interesting with Massachusetts because it's I just came back from Texas, and they're kind of like the opposites. Like Texas is very warm and friendly, but then when it comes to like putting pen to paper and voting, it's a little cruel.
Well, look,
and Massachusetts are a bunch of assholes, but then when they put their pen to paper, they're actually pretty compassionate and tolerant when it comes to law. And
the interesting thing too about Texas is that when there are freaks, there are true freaks, and they do cogitate. They all go to. Well, we were just in Denton, and I think everybody who has any form of individuality has kind of migrated to Denton, which is great. A small town outside of
150,000. Yeah.
Well, we can't say we haven't had our problems with Massachusetts and Boston in particular.
Oh, yes. Trust me. I know that there's other things that go along with that. There's a huge Catholic demographic that, Catholics are the most obsessed with Satan, as far as I can tell, but maybe not. I don't know. But historically, I think so. Right.
Well, what we're finding now is everything's so polarized that and it's so acceptable to discriminate against us. Right. If a Democratic candidate or public official discriminates against us and we take issue with it, we'll find that people who are on our side when we're fighting against the conservatives are no longer on our side. And of course, the conservatives are usually not on our side.
Right. Are there any right-wing libertarians or so far right that they actually do side with you guys? You see this.
Actually, no. We've seen some people who aren't so hypocritical. The constitutional purists who look at what I used to see that earlier when I was dumb enough to look at the comments on like Breitbart and stuff like that. There'd be a whole flood of people saying these guys should be burned, these guys should be destroyed. But there would be a few of the regular readers who would say, well, but we don't want the government dictating to us religion. They actually weren't hypocritical. And I've been on Tucker Carlson's show
Okay.
3 times now.
Oh, I am going to investigate those YouTubers.
In each time, it might make people uncomfortable to hear, but each time I've had people reach out to me and say they're actually regular viewers of Tucker Carlson, and for some reason they have some type of respect for that fool.
But the issue too is because there's so many ignorant idiots in politics who don't know really what the Constitution was about, and at the same time don't realize what this country was founded on before the Constitution, which was just another form of religious persecution, abolition of native people. They were the Puritans. I mean, the name alone should horrify anybody. They were the extreme religious perverts driven out or voluntarily exiled out of other places to come here and then, foment more of their bullshit. But if you want to go to strict constitutionalism, and I mean, the bottom line is separation of church and state. Hello, start there. It is not at all what's going on right now.
So it's interesting though, as far as people who, strange bedfellows, all
my bedfellows are strange, honey. But you notice I'm sitting alone, so that means me, myself, and I are having an orgy as I speak to you. Handsome, intelligent man.
Our after school program, the After School Satan Club, was founded in response or inspired by the Good News Clubs. And the Good News Club have vocally recognized and acknowledged our right to participate. They don't, they've distanced themselves ideologically from us, but they have actually come out acknowledging and respecting our
what goes on in those after school satanic clubs. I mean, I feel like even though I'm a high school dropout, I kind of had my own after school satanic clubs in my basement of my parents' house. Just me and a few others.
The after school Satan clubs focus on critical thinking, reasoning, things like that. And then they always ask, well, why do you call it the after school Satan club? As though we should conceal that, as though they wouldn't be angry if they found out later on down the line, oh no, there's Satanists running these clubs. We want people to know who we are and that we do productive things in the community. But what's funny is the Good News Clubs are explicitly made to proselytize the children, to convert them to evangelical Christianity, indoctrinate them with hellfire and brimstone, tell them if they don't follow this one particular religious path, they'll rot in hell or burn in hell or be eternally tormented. And they try to train them to proselytize to other children. These people don't have a problem with that. I mean, a lot of parents in these school districts do have a problem with that. And that's something they try to gloss over when we come in. But once we come in, the crowd that didn't care about the after school Satan clubs are saying, well, what's to stop these guys from proselytizing to children, even though they say they don't? And what do they really believe? And all these things that they should have been asking the other direction all of a sudden are at issue.
But as far as activities go, the last 2 activities, or from the last 2 meetings, in one meeting in one location, the kids made cards and artwork for children in hospitals, and another one, they made dog toys for animals in shelters. So it's so it's critical thinking, but it's also things empathetic things for.
Well, and that's like one of the first tenets of the 7 tenets of the Satanic Temple is about compassion and empathy, which is extremely devoid in most and almost all of the right-wing politicians. And the Democrats may fake they have compassion, but really what's being done right now is still atrocious. And the bottom line to being, where are the rights of where is just, this is one thing that pisses me off. Oh, $15 an hour is like, that's still modern slavery. Let's just get back to reality here. That's a basic bottom line that, we've accomplished so much by that, still keeping people in abject poverty when basically 7 multi-billionaire motherfuckers are buying Mars. Don't get it. Just saying.
I have a question with the after school program. So you must have some youth that are just looking for a life raft, like their home situation is just not good, or they just completely disagree with their folks and the way they're being raised. Do you get blowback from parents when their child is independently coming to you guys and the parents are like, I don't want my child there? Do you have to manage that ever?
We
There's
have
a permission slip so that they have to fill out. So we don't really get kids there independently.
Okay.
We also mirrored the Good News clubs because we wanted to. Originally, we were just creating the after school Satan clubs as a alternative to those, so that targets the ages between 5 and 12 years old. So at that point, they pretty much need their parents' permission. We have gotten a few disturbing bits of outreach, like last week or the week before, we had a woman reach out to us complaining that her autistic child had been looking at our website and was now talking about his freedoms, and she put it in scare quotes, freedom.
Okay, all right.
And he was talking about I think he was talking about an exemption at school. So the nearest thing we could figure that we would have available that would be relevant to a child to claim exemption on our website was the exemption from corporal punishment. There's still schools that allow the administration to beat children, and we created an exemption that children can fill out regardless of whether they have shitty parents. And they can say that due to my beliefs, you're not allowed to beat me. And we got this message from this lady who said that now, because of the words we had put into the mind of her child, he was threatening the school, apparently, with the idea that legal action could come if he's beaten. Which
Good.
I assume, right. And she was claiming that she was going to take legal action against us for this.
For not wanting to promote, for trying to abolish corporal punishment for children.
So imagine that poor kid's home life.
What about death threats, bomb threats? Do you guys get your share of those?
I've got a $100,000 bounty on me now from a group of sovereign citizens.
I was going to say, we don't like to talk about it too much.
I understand.
But Doug just did.
How about, do you ever just get like, heart-shaped chocolates and flowers for no reason? Like, we love you.
We do actually. We get a lot of support. There's a lot more love than there is hate.
I would imagine so.
Well, and the thing is, look, if people understand, and this is why maybe parents should be, of course, invited to the after-school things, is if they understand what you are not preaching, but telling, what advising, offering, people would have a better idea and would be less likely to just paint Satanism and Satanic Temple with the fear of their own upbringing. They'd have to realize really what it is.
Now, I don't know the Bible that well, but I know I have some friends.
I do.
I have some friends that do, and
what about
isn't
greatest Marvel comic ever written?
Isn't the Bible? Isn't Satan like kind of a pal of God's, and he's kind of rebelled? I mean, weren't they all kind of just like hanging out with each other, or geez, I don't know. It wasn't like,
look, Tim, excuse me, Tim, you know what my idea about Jesus is. I've said it many times. Jesus was a gay drug dealer who liked prostitutes and hung out with other guys, did ayahuasca, was put out for 3 days and came back to life after he was roofied. Bottom line, hello, Jesus.
I'll accept it.
And actually, an evangelical bishop wrote 2 books about Jesus came out. Well, I have to say,
a friend of mine grew up with the Verhovens, Paul Verhoeven, the director, and that's a script supposedly that he has that he can't get the studios to back yet. That basically, the Virgin Mary, quote unquote, was actually raped by a Roman guard, and if she accused that Roman guard, she could be killed herself. So she actually made up that she was impregnated by God, I guess, and so that's where that comes from.
I mean, the Bible to me is like the Chinese whisper. You know what I mean? It's like one person says something, you tell another person in their ear, and it just gets so convoluted. And I don't believe a fucking word of it. I mean, first of all, becoming, as I did, a young Satanist because my father, not a religious man, was a door-to-door Bible salesman. Beautiful, huge volumes, gloriously illustrated, going door to door merely to get inside women's pants. That pretty much at the age of 9 told me, God who? God was the first cop, the first cock, the first big dick, low life, no good motherfucker that condemned this world to fucking war. Excuse me, I'm ranting, but I do that occasionally. So tell us a little about the gallery at the Salem headquarters of the Satanic Temple. What goes on there? It's great that you have a gallery.
Well, we have events, we have art exhibits, we have our offices there. It's it really helped to legitimize us, I think, in the minds of the public to have a physical location dedicated to the work that we're doing. I think a lot of people think that the artistic aspect of us having an art gallery is kind of arbitrary, but art plays a huge role, I think, in satanic identification, and art itself, I think, has often been denigrated by traditional religions. This obsession with worshiping icons or creating graven images and other such things that I think of Satanism is in some ways an art movement.
Well, I was saying before that my friend termed what you do artivism, like artistic activism, which I think is really appropriate. I mean, I always say, art is the salve to the universal wound, because that's why people create, is both to get out the pus of their own putrefaction after the abuse of reality, and to share with others, the possibility of something beyond themselves.
Right. And protest has always been about creating a spectacle to raise people's awareness. If it's not being integrated with some type of real activism that's calling for tangible change, then the spectacle is all that there is. And at the point where we have people out every day waving signs for different causes, and sometimes many of those people in the same crowd holding up signs for different causes, it tells you, I think, that you need to start rethinking how you put your message out to the public, and it compels you, I think, to be more creative, but also to be more proactive in figuring out how to tackle the issues head on. So it's not merely to raise awareness.
Well, so much of protest has become just a narcissistic endeavor, where art, by definition, at least is the antithesis of that. At least good art.
Yeah, or it can be also make fun of itself and be self-consciously.
Tim, that's a good point. One thing I wanted to say that does differentiate the Satanic Temple is great sense of humor, guys. Thank you. I mean, I think I'm funny as fuck, but most people are just too terrified to laugh. But I do appreciate a sense of humor, and you have it.
Great. The world has tried to beat that out of us. I've got to tell you, like, the more time goes on, the more reticent I think we are to engage openly in the kind of sense of humor we have, because people feel like that takes away from your authenticity or the earnestness of your message, that you have to be stone sober 100% of the time and speak about it in raw academic terms and never crack a smile, or else you don't mean what you're saying. And that kills me.
But that is a very good, very, very good point. But, comedians can get away with almost murder, or at least masturbation, in my opinion. But that's being a comedian. That's a separate category, actually. But I mean, I often think that for decades, I've been saying, dealing with serious subjects, but I am laughing hysterically inside, maybe because I am at heart an apocalyptician, and I love the apocalypse because it's the same as it ever was. But I do appreciate the sense of humor.
I get frustrated. People would be on the same side of me, but they argue about the process, and that there's just not one way to filter this planet. Some people get very serious and act, they become activists, and that's fine. Laughter is not a fine filter of how we deal with these anxieties, these stresses, these things that we're all trying to filter. And I don't know. I guess
take it with a grain or a pillar of salt, whatever it takes.
A lot of the humor, comes from giving people enough rope, and then it's just sort of playing off, acknowledging and accepting, like our Bladensburg thing that we're going to be doing, our second annual recognition of the Bladensburg Satanic Peace Cross. Came from there was I don't know if you know the background, but Bladensburg,
tell us a little bit about that.
So Bladensburg, Maryland, there's this giant 30-foot, I think, or cross that had been up there since World War I, and to maintain the cross required cost from the taxpayers in the community. So someone sued to get it taken down. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court then had to figure out, how do we legitimize a giant cross on public property? So one of the things that was said in the ruling was that the cross represents, yes, it's still a Christian symbol because they didn't want to run afoul of their, Christian contingencies. They said it's a Christian symbol, but in this instance it represents everyone in the community. And so our take as well, if it represents everyone in the community, then it represents Satanists. And so if it represents Satanists, we shouldn't be wanting this thing down. We should be celebrating this satanic peace cross. So we came out last year and did this celebration, this ritual celebration of how wonderful it is that now there is a satanic monument on public property. And not only is there a satanic monument, we need to make a pilgrimage, and Satanists need to come to Bladensburg, pay their respect to the satanic peace cross, and each year we're going to have this ritual celebration of this amazing thing, this satanic monument. How wonderful is that, so we have necklaces with the satanic peace cross that we've inverted, that people can wear, and it's embracing it.
I love it, and maybe you could find a removal company to turn that cross upside down, because really, if we want to go back to crucifixions, a lot of them were upside down.
Paul,
terrifying, by the way. Although I don't know. Would probably feel really good on my back if I was stretched out that far and wide occasionally.
So what are some big things on the horizon? I know Lydia and myself are coming to Salem, but
can't wait.
So any other
celebrating my birthday at the Satanic Temple where I belong. I told you, Malcolm, that the first time I was ever asked if I was a Satanist was by Tracy Lords, that gorgeous porno star, dumb as a doorknob, who walked into my house when I lived in Glendale and said, "Are you a Satanist?" And I'm like, "What is a Satanist?" And of course she didn't know. So I'm like, "Well, I guess I am." But I would tell the Jehovah's Witnesses when they would come knock on my door, and I even got my neighbor to say, "Don't go to her house. She's a Satanist." I'd say, "Can we talk to you about Jehovah?" I'm like, "Can I talk to you about Satan?" And they would never come back. Again, sense of frickin' humor, kids. Sense of humor.
You learned how to handle the door-to-door Bible salesman early on.
Well, hey, watching my dad work, I'm a city-to-city salesman, so I did learn a lot from Dad. All my worst qualities. Thank you very much.
So as far as like stuff on the horizon, we still have to like break it down by campaign by campaign. So on the reproductive rights front, we have a few things that are three major things that are coming out. I'll do it in order of smallest to biggest, but there's requirements for counseling in a number of states, and the counseling requirements are basically come from a written document. And in the past, our approach was, they should, our members should not be required to receive this document because it is, there's factual information or unfactual, there's things that are incorrect, there's other things there. So it violates, if you're forcing us to violate our religious, and yes, if we were any other religion, that would have been successful. So now the approach that we're taking, we've created our own alternative counseling document that meets the demands of the state while presenting our own angle. And this is what we want to do, state to state where there's mandatory documents. So that's one. Then
and that's for what? Is that for reproductive rights?
That's reproductive. Yeah, that's abortion.
So important. Please, I do have an article essay, and it is published. Motherhood is not compulsory. It is not.
And then we're suing the FDA. The document's already been filed. Been drafted. It'll probably be filed either next week or the week after. But the basis for the lawsuit there, it comes down to the lawsuit that was responsible for the creation of RFRA, where Native Americans wanted to have access to peyote for their religious rituals. The Supreme Court said no. Then RFRA was drafted, so now the Native Americans can get access to peyote, for their. So we want access to mifepristone and misoprostol for our religious rituals. We have an abortion, a satanic abortion ritual, and it's necessary for us to have these medications. And so our ask is much lower because peyote is a Schedule I drug. We just want access to unfettered access under the guidance of medical professionals. To be able to administer without any restrictions other than what's advised by, like I said, medical professionals.
What drugs are these?
Mifepristone, misoprostol. It's
abortifactants, right?
Yeah, they're drugs that are used to induce. They're drugs that are used to induce abortion.
Yep.
I mean, you know what I've been saying for years is mandatory sterilization and mass vasectomies. And February is vasectomy month, and I offer to pay for anyone's vasectomy who wants it, because I think there are enough human beings. It doesn't have to be mandatory. That's just my humor. But I just think, and they are actually making a birth control pill for men, which I think is about frickin' time.
Interesting.
But the biggest thing on that front is we're looking to start our own religious abortion clinics.
Okay.
How about a subsector for your own vasectomy clinics? May I help you administer?
Well, anyone can get. There's no restrictions to access there, so it's not something where you need.
Well, I just want access to the correct tools, and I will carry out the needed duty, which I think I've been called to. But come back to me on that one.
Maybe we should demand to use the incorrect tools, just a guillotine, just a nut guillotine.
I knew I liked you before I even met you, darling. Exactly. The nut guillotine.
So what are your opinions? What do you think's going to happen with this Roe versus Wade thing? I mean,
fortunately, there were a lot of protests this week about it, but I mean,
that can do shit. Come on.
No, when has it ever?
Well, it's not going to stop them. No, I think, like they said, it wasn't the final draft, but I don't think whatever the final draft is going.
Well, and who was the main asshole quoting? But something from the witch trials of like 1718. He was referring back to a statue that was concerning witches in the 1700s. The main mandator of these new abortions.
No, we are in a dire state of affairs, and we are moving backwards, and the theocrats are eroding our civil liberties. And I really do hope, and that's why I made the point about our humor, that there's much more to this than humor, and that I hope people can see that we're actually on the front lines, fighting to preserve pluralism, fighting to preserve our most bedrock, fundamental, entrenched democratic values from being overtaken by people who aren't going to stop with Roe versus Wade. They weren't going to stop with In God We Trust on money. They're not going to stop by having public funds put into their schools and initiatives. They're not going to stop with the overturn of Roe versus Wade. They're going to keep going until there's a theocracy here or until they are stopped. And I think people should look at our campaigns in that light. And even if they find it funny to see our opposition flummoxed by us using their same arguments against them, they should realize that it goes much beyond that, and that the actual outcomes of these trials that we're putting into litigation right now really have ramifications for all of us.
Beyond,
right? For a long time.
Beyond. And also what I respect is really the level of education that both of you have in order to pursue actual lawsuits, because we can all sit here and complain, which we all do, myself included, but to actually be able to have whatever the means are that are necessary to pursue lawsuits beyond even demonstrations is so freaking important. And thank you so much for that.
Quick question. Do you think Biden and the Dems, do you think stacking the courts is on the table?
I think that ship has sailed. I think it's past the point where that would necessarily be useful. And if they stack the courts, nothing's going to stop it from expanding even further later on.
Arms race of just absurdity. But are they giving no choice in a weird way? It's like
right. Something would have to, somebody would have to rein it in, and probably by executive order. So I don't think the court stacking method is viable as a lot of people.
I mean, I'll have to quote Kafka here. There is hope, but not for us. Although, of course, we have to entertain some kind of, if not hope, at least diligence in our protest, in our refusal to accept the bullshit, in the fact that we will protest with our own kind of politics, with coming together with communities, because we are out there and we are the enemy of the fucking state, whose sole job at this point is to impoverish us all while they become fucking richer, same as it ever was, feudalism, and to take away more and more rights every time we turn around. And it's cyclical. It is the same thing that has happened historically. And the problem is, America, as a war whoring nation who has not been out of war except for 10 years of its existence, the war is now within. The war is within because of the fact that we've allowed the uneducation of people, the stupidity by lack of nutrition, and just the dumbing down of America, where dumbing down and that patriotic uprise, which is a very dangerous thing, which is the state that we're in now, which is a state that I find highly unacceptable. This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and my friends at the Satanic Temple. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks so
much.